In today's tutorial we are going to explore these ideas and we are going to make a very beautiful pendant, and at the end of the video I'm going to share with you my best tips for flawless image transfers and for making your work with the clay extruder easier. I'm Michaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and let's dive in. Start by properly conditioning your polymer clay. So I'm going to mix 1 unit of true blue polymer clay with 1 unit of Cernit gold metallic polymer clay. I'm not going to blend the colors into one solid color for this project. Next, I'm going to do the same for magenta polymer clay and gold metallic polymer clay. Again, I'm working with 1 unit of each color and I'm going to mix them, and then I'm just going to use a round camper cutter to cut out small discs, and I feel it's easier to load the polymer clay like this. I will put these discs into a log that I'm going to roll against my working table and then put it into the extruder. So initially I used an extruder disc with larger openings, but when I tried to decorate the clay with these logs, I didn't like the effect, so I decided to switch for an extruder disc with smaller openings. Next, we are going to use the extruder to make a retro cane, and this is a polymer clay classics, but I think you get such a beautiful cane in the end, and it's so easy to make it that I surely like to do this very often. So I'm going to use the same round cutter and I'm cutting round elements of the gold metallic, blue, true blue and magenta polymer clay, and this time I'm going to introduce a 4th color, and I'm going to use some yellow, true yellow polymer clay. So you'll just have to use the cutter and cut out round elements, and then you'll just have to stack these pieces. And yes, the order does matter, so I decided to stack in the following order: gold, magenta, blue and yellow, and then I repeated the same order. And you can experiment and you can play with this idea and change the order to see the result that you might get. And then I put them into a log and I rolled it against my table, and I've made it quite thinner than the body of the extruder, and this is going to make the extrusion process easier. I used an extruder disc with a small square opening, and then you'll just have to extrude the clay, use the blade and trim, and then I'm just using my fingers and I'm pressing lightly on the clay while turning it from time to time, and this is called reducing a cane, meaning I'm making this cane thinner, which will result in smaller elements. To have an idea, this is the size that I want for this project, and this is the size that you would get when you are using the extruded cane without reducing it. You'll just have to use a sharp blade and cut thin pieces, and I like how these pieces look on the final pendant. Next, you'll just have to use a beautiful texture plate and texture a sheet of gold metallic polymer clay, and I'm using a sheet passed through the setting number 3 of my Atlas Pest machine, and then I pressed a silicone texture sheet into the clay, and then I used the roller and I rolled on top of the clay with some pressure, applying some pressure, and I'm happy with the look of the piece. And in fact, I'm going to use this design as a guideline to decorate the clay with thinner logs of polymer clay made with the extruder. And so I decided to go for a disc with thinner openings. It has multiple openings but thinner, and you can see the size of the logs. They are surely much thinner than the ones that I've made in the beginning, but they are perfect for the idea that I have for this design. So I will just put these extruded logs of clay on top of the design, following, let's say, the lines of the design. And I'm going to use metallic gold polymer clay. I'm going to use the mixture of magenta and gold polymer clay, and of course I'm going to use the blue-green, greenish blue polymer clay made with true blue and gold metallic polymer clay. If you don't have an extruder, you can use your hands and roll the clay against your working table and make thinner logs of polymer clay, but it is going to be difficult to make them of the same size, but it is possible to do this. To take these thin logs and recreate the pattern. And so I'm putting the log on top of the clay, and I'm using my craft knife to remove the excess, and then I'm going to place some retro cane elements in some areas to make the design even more interesting. And then you'll just have to do this for your piece, and I'm going to cover 2/3 of the piece, and I'm going to play with these colors. I think that when you are using textured clay as guiding lines, it's quite easy to make a beautiful texture using extruded clay, using different colors of extruded clay, especially metallic colors of polymer clay. And when you put together these elements with a retro cane, you can only have a very beautiful clay slab. You can make beads, earrings, pendants, as you wish. And then I decided to put some retro cane slices in some areas to spice up a little bit the design, so I just pressed them gently into the clay. And so I used this technique to decorate one side of the textured polymer clay, and I am going to use image transfer and a beautiful image of a Japanese woman wearing a beautiful kimono. And for this image transfer, I'm using pearlescent polymer clay. Loving this Japanese inspired design, you'll definitely want to check out my latest Japanese fan earring tutorial. It's a free flip book with step-by-step images of the process, and I've made this especially for my lovely newsletter subscribers. Join now and get access. You'll find the link in the description below. And so this is an image that I printed on a laser printer, and this is very important for this type of image transfer process, like using rubbing alcohol. So I put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on top of the sheet of polymer clay, and my clay is passed through the setting number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine, and then I put the image on top, and I applied a thin coat of rubbing alcohol. I put the image, I gently press the image into the polymer clay, and then you'll just have to use a burnishing tool. I like to use a bone folder. You could use the back of a spoon, you could use an old credit card. I'll just take the time to burnish the clay burnish the image into the clay, and then I'm going to apply, and when I feel that the image starts to come off, I will just use my hands to gently remove the paper, and sometimes I'm going to add a little bit more liquid. I've added a little bit more rubbing alcohol, but of course you could use water for this part of the process. And when I feel that the paper won't come off anymore, I'm going to add a little bit more liquid, and I am going to continue gently rubbing on top of the paper and gently removing the paper, and I'm very careful not to press on the clay because this is going to result in a smudged image, which we don't want, of course. And then you'll just have to use your craft knife and cut out this transferred image, and I'm leaving a little bit of and I'm leaving a thin border, and then you should let this piece to the side for 5-7 minutes so it dries, and you can use baby wipes and clean the white scrap clay. Use your craft knife and remove any excess clay, and if you have scrap clay colored with the image transfer, you can use baby wipes and remove those colors, or if you want you can just mix the clay and it will result in colorful polymer clay, in colorful scrap clay. Now it's time to take care of the back of the piece. To use gold metallic polymer clay and the same texture sheet to make beautiful pattern for the back, the pendant as well. And I'm using clay that I passed through the setting number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine, and then I just pressed the same textured plate into the clay, and I used the roller to apply more pressure and create a beautiful definition of the design. Then you'll just have to flip this piece of polymer clay, and I'm going to continue decorating the areas around the image transfer with the same techniques and the same colors. And then you'll just have to put this clay slab on top of the textured clay, and then use parchment paper and gently press everything together. And now that's the most difficult part of the project. I have to decide how to cut the shape of the pendant, and I decided not to use cutters for this project, so I'm just going to go freehand, and I'm going to use the flexible blade and cut a beautiful shape for the design, hopefully beautiful. So I use the flexible blade to cut the curved sides for the design, and the rigid blade to cut the upper and the bottom parts of the pendant. And because I already had some extruded clay using the extruder disc with the larger holes, I'm just going to use this clay to make a beautiful decorative border for the piece. So I'm just using several pieces, and I'm pressing them into the focal piece and also into each other. And of course you'll have to do your best to neatly join the areas where the small piece, where you put together the ends of the extruded clay, and at the same time I'm pressing this decorative frame into the piece. Do take the time to make sure that this edge is well pressed into the focal piece, and when you are happy with the look of the piece, you can put it in the oven and bake it for 45 minutes at the temperature recommended by the polymer clay manufacturer, but I decided that I did not want a flat piece, so I'm going to bake this piece on top of a soda can wrapped in paper, because we've made the back of the piece as well, so I cannot put it directly on top of the soda can because this would result in a glass-like look for the piece. And this is the baked piece, and then you'll have to let the clay cool down, and I decided to apply resin. You will have to seal the part with the image transfer, that's for sure, but you don't have to put any varnish or resin on the parts decorated with the extruded logs of clay. I applied a thin coat of UV resin on top of the piece, and you'll notice I did not apply on the frame, on the margin. Can let this piece sit for 4-5 minutes and then make sure that you have no gaps, meaning no areas with no resin, and you'll have to use the heat gun again to remove any air bubbles. And then I use the UV lamp, and this is a strong UV lamp, and I used it to cure the UV resin for 2 consecutive minutes. Now we need an attaching system in order to be able to wear the pendant, so you'll just have to use a drilling tool, drill holes in the upper part of the pendant, and I decided to use 20 gauge gold color wire to make an attaching system, a bail for the pendant. So I'm using a wire straightener. I straightened the wire and I used, I don't know, 15-20 centimeters of wire, and I used round nose pliers to make a spiraling design on one side, and then I put the end through the hole. I used a skewer to wrap the wire around the skewer and make this interesting bail for my piece. Then I put the wire through the second hole, and I'm going to use again round nose pliers to make a second spiraling design on the other side. Use your flash cutters to remove the excess wire, and then I'm just putting and then I just used the smaller part of the jaws of the round nose pliers to make a loop, and then I put this loop inside the jaws of the round nose pliers, and I've just used the pliers to make a spiral, and this will allow me to put this pendant on a wire frame. And there you have it, your own beautiful Japanese inspired clay pendant. And if you like this image transfer idea, I encourage you to check this image transfer pendant